Hello students, hope you all are doing well and reading well at home. Welcome to the 10th standard social class. Today we are going to read about print culture and the modern world from history. But before that, I want you to get ready with a pen and a notebook so that you can jot down the important points while we are going through this lesson. So are you ready, children? So the name of the lesson is Print Culture and the Modern World. It is difficult for us to imagine a world without printed matter, isn't it? We find evidence of print everywhere around us, in books, journals, newspapers, prints of famous paintings, and also in everyday things like theatre programs, official circulars, pamphlets, calendars, diaries, advertisements, cinema posters, and many more. We read printed literature, see printed images, follow the news through newspapers, and track public debates that appear in print. We take for granted what we see, and then forget that there was a time before print. We may not realize that print itself has a history which has in fact shaped our contemporary world. What is this history? When did printed literature really start? How has it helped create the modern world? So in this chapter, we will look at the development of print from the beginning in East Asia to its expansion in Europe and in India. We will understand the impact of the spread of technology and consider how social lives and cultures changed with the coming of print. So as I told you, we look into the development of print from its beginning in East Asia to its expansion in Europe and in India. We will then understand the impact of the spread of technology and consider how social lives and cultures changed with the coming of print. So making of book before introduction of print. So let us see the first printed books. The earliest kind of print technology developed in China, Japan and Korea called as hand printing. From 576 AD, books in China were printed by rubbing paper against inked surface of wood blocks. So it was printed by rubbing paper against inked surface of wooden blocks. So this is an accordion book, children. From examination point of view, this is very important. This is the traditional Chinese accordion book which was folded and stitched at the side. See how crafty those people were. They were stitching it very carefully. Accordion book. It's a Chinese accordion book was folded and stitched at the side. Calligraphy. What is calligraphy? It is the art of beautiful and stylized writing. Calligraphy is the art of beautiful and stylized writing. Superbly skilled craftsmen could duplicate it with accuracy. They were able to duplicate it with more accuracy. So let us see what is in store again. So the first printed books. The earliest kind of print technology was developed in China, Japan and Korea, as we have seen. As both sides of the thin porous sheet could not be printed, the traditional Chinese accordion book was folded and stitched at the side. Superbly skilled craftsmen could duplicate it with accuracy. So this is what calligraphy meant. What is calligraphy? It is the art of beautiful and stylized writing. So for a very long time, China remained the major producer of printed material. Further, why? It needed printed material. The earliest kind of print technology, as we know, was developed in China, and for a very long time, the major producer of printed material was again China. China possessed a huge bureaucratic system which recruited its personnel through civil service examination. I mean to say, for the government jobs, people had to appear as an examination which was in written nature. So they had to study textbooks. So textbooks for this examination were printed in vast numbers under the sponsorship of the imperial state. From the 19th century, the number of examination candidates went up and, that increased the volume of print material. So this is how Chinese people have printed more books. So now let us see. Rich women began to read and publish their poetry and plays. New reading culture was accompanied by new technology of Western printing techniques and mechanical press. Shanghai became the hub of new print technology. Shanghai became the hub of new printing technology. So the new reading culture was accompanied by new technology. Western printing techniques and mechanical presses were imported in late 19th century. Shanghai became the hub of the new print culture. You have to remember these things, children. Printing in Japan. Printing in Japan. Buddhist missionaries from China introduced hand printing technology in Japan in 768 to 770 AD. The oldest Japanese book was printed in 868 and it was called the Diamond Sutra. Okay, now let us see what happened in Japan again. So, this is a Buddhist Diamond Sutra which contained 6 sheets of text, woodcut illustrations. Pictures were printed on textiles, playing cards and paper money. In medieval Japan, poets and prose writers were regularly published and books were cheap and abundant. Printing of visual material led to interesting publishing practices. In the late 18th century, in the flourishing urban areas at Edo was later known as Tokyo. So the first name of Tokyo was Edo. Illustrated collection of paintings depicted an elegant urban culture involving artists, courtesans and tea house gatherings. Libraries and bookstores were packed with hard printed material of various types, books on women, musical instruments, calculations, tea ceremony, flower arrangements, proper etiquette, how to behave, cooking and famous places. These were the kind of books which are in great circulation during this course of time. So this is a page from the Diamond Sutra. So as I told you, pictures were printed on textiles, playing cards and paper money. In medieval Japan, poets and prose writes were regularly published. Books were cheap and abundant. Printing of visual material led to interesting publishing practices. So print comes to Europe. For centuries, silk and spices from China flowed into Europe through, yes, you are right, the Silk Route. In the 11th century, Chinese paper reached Europe via the same route. Paper made possible the production of manuscripts carefully written by scribes. Then in 1295, Marco Polo, a great explorer, returned to Italy after many years of exploration in China. Then, as you know, China already had the technology of woodblock printing. So Marco Polo brought the knowledge of print technology back with him from China. Luxury editions were still handwritten on very expensive, vellum. So vellum is a parchment made from the skin of animals. So they dry the skin of animal, then they write whatever they want on it. That was called vellum, V-E-L-L-U-M. Clear? And what does it show? So merchants and students in university towns bought the cheaper printed copies. So once Marco Polo brought this knowledge back with him, now what happened? The Italians began producing books with wood blocks and soon the technology spread to other parts of Europe. As the demand for books increased, booksellers all over Europe began exporting books to many different countries. Book fairs were held at different places. And scribes started working for booksellers. So these are all the things which happened during this part of time. But there were still some limitations. What were the limitations? We will see over here. But before that, we must remember Gutenberg and the printing press. During this period of time, Gutenberg invented the printing press. But let us see the limitations first. Handwritten manuscripts could not satisfy the ever increasing demand for books. Copying was expensive, laborious, and time consuming. Manuscripts were fragile, they were easily breaking down into small pieces, difficult to handle and carry around. Their circulation remained limited. Thus, there was a great need for quicker and cheaper production. Then what happened? We'll see now. Rise of the printing press. What happened? The printing press was introduced. Let us see by whom. Johannes Gutenberg was the son of a merchant and grew up on agricultural estate. Later, he became a master goldsmith. He created lead molds making for trinkets. He adopted this technology to design new innovations. So we'll see in detail what he did. So Gutenberg was the son of a merchant and grew up on large agricultural estate as we have seen. From his childhood, he had seen wine and olive presses. Subsequently, he learned the art of art of polishing stones, became a master goldsmith, and also acquired the expertise to create lead molds which were used for making trinkets as we have noted over here. Drawing on this kind of knowledge, Gutenberg adapted existing technology to design his innovation. The olive press provided the model for the printing press, and molds were used for casting the metal types for the letters of the alphabet. By 1448, Gutenberg perfected the system. Then what happened? We'll see now. He perfected the system. Then the first book he printed was the Bible with 180 copies. It took 3 years to produce them. It took 3 years to produce the 180 copies of the Bible. By the standards of the time, the production became fast. But this new technology did not entirely displace the art of producing books by hand. The shift from hand printing to mechanical printing led to what we call the printing or the print revolution. This particular thing led to the print revolution. Okay, we have seen about Gutenberg and his press. What he did. In fact, printed books at first closely resembled the written manuscripts in appearance and layout. The metal letters imitated the ornamental handwritten styles. Borders were illuminated by hand with foliage and other patterns. So once the book was printed, the corners of each page were handwritten or drawn by a hand, and foliage, leaves and all those things, they were designing the shapes of leaves and flowers. Okay. Now what happened? Next we'll see. In the books printed for the rich, space for decoration was kept blank on the printed page. Each purchaser could choose the design and decide on the painting school that would do the illustration. In the 100 years, 1450 and 1550, printing presses were set up in most countries of Europe. Printers from Germany traveled to other countries, seeking work and helping start new presses. As the number of printing presses increased, book production boomed. So, development of new ways of producing books, change in the relationship with institutions and authorities, influenced popular perceptions, opened up new ways of looking at things. So, print revolution, what is the meaning of that? What it meant. So, the printing press had a very great impact on the society as a whole. How? A new reading public has emerged. Religious debates and fear of print started. Print and the descent actually started at this particular period of time. We will see how this happened now. As we know that what was this revolution, we are going to study now. So it was not just a development, a new way of producing books. It transformed the lives of people, changing their relationship to information and technology and with institutions and authorities. We have seen in the previous slide. It influenced people's perceptions and opened up new ways of thinking or looking at things. A new reading public has emerged. How? With the printing press, a new reading public emerged. Printing reduced the cost of books. The time and labor required to produce each book came down, and multiple copies could be produced with great ease. Books flooded the market, reaching out to an ever growing readership. Access to books created a new culture of reading. Earlier, reading was restricted to the elites or the rich or aristocracy only. Common people lived in a world of oral culture. They heard sacred texts read out, ballads recited, and folk tales narrated. Knowledge was transferred orally. The transmission of new reading culture was easy as the literacy rate was very low. So what did the printers do? They began printing or publishing popular ballads and folk tales illustrated with pictures. These were sung and recited in villages and in taverns and in towns. But the transition was not so simple. Books could be read only by the literate, and the rates of literacy in most European countries was very low. As a result, what happened? We'll see over here. As a result, what happened? Oral culture entered print and printed material was orally transmitted. The hearing public and the reading public became intermingled. So religious debates and fear of print. So print created a wide circulation of ideas. Print created a wide circulation of ideas, introduced a new world of debate and discussion. Introduced a new world of debate and discussion. Let us see how it happened. Okay. Print created the possibility of wide circulation of ideas and introduced a new world of debate and discussion. Even those who disagreed with established authorities could now print and circulate their ideas. Through the printing message, they could persuade people to think differently and move them to action. This had a significance and difference in different spheres of life. Not everyone welcomed print book. Those who did also had fears about it. Many were apprehensive of the effects that the easier access to the printed word and the wider circulation of books could have on people's minds. The bureaucracy generally had a fear about this. The authority of valuable literature would be destroyed. This anxiety led to widespread criticism of print media. Let us take an example over here. In 1517, the religious reformer Martin Luther wrote 95 Theses criticizing many of the practices and rituals of the Roman Catholic Church. So there was a fight among different religions. There was a fight among the people belonging to a particular religion. So this was slowly resolved after what we call a period of struggle. Okay. So this led to division within the church at the beginning of Protestant Reformation. So print and dissent. Print and religious literature stimulated many distinctive individual interpretation of faith even among little educated working people. The 16th century, Minocchio, a miller in Italy, began to read books that were available in his locality. He reinterpreted the message of the Bible and formulated a view of God and creation that made the people of Roman Catholic Church angry. When the Roman Church began its inquisition to repress heretical ideas, Minocchio was hauled up twice and ultimately executed. So after this, what happened? They imposed the many controls over publishers and booksellers. The index of prohibited books was introduced in 1558. This was introduced in the year 1558. The macabre dance, the reading mania. The literacy levels in Europe increased up to 60 to 80% in 17th and 18th century. High literacy level created new reading public. Booksellers employed peddlers to roam and sell books. So churches of different denominations set up schools in villages, carrying literacy to peasants and artisans. By the end of 18th century, as I said you, the literacy rate increased. So as literacy and schools spread in European countries, there was virtual reading mania. People wanted books to read, and printers produced books in ever increasing numbers. They increase in numbers. Now new forms of popular literature appeared in print, targeting new audiences. Booksellers employed peddlers who roamed around villages carrying little books for sale. There were almanacs or ritual calendars along with ballads and folk tales. So many things changed during this particular course of time. So many historians believe print culture created conditions which led to French Revolution, such as print popularized the ideas of Enlightenment thinkers, which included critical commentary on tradition, superstition and despotism. Voltaire and Rousseau were among the prominent Enlightenment thinkers during this period of time. Print created a new culture and dialogue and debate. Print created a new culture of dialogue and debate. General public began to discuss the values, norms and institutions and tried to re-evaluate the established notions. By the 1780s, there was a surge in literature which mocked the royalty and criticized their morality. So this print actually was talking against the ruling government or the king or the queen. So print helped in creating an image of the royalty that they indulged in their own pleasure at the expense of the common public. See what kind of impact print had on the society now. So the nobility and the common people before the French Revolution, a cartoon of the late 19th century saw was leaps in mass literacy in Europe. This brought a large number of new readers among children, women and workers. Many books were written and printed keeping in mind the sense and sensibilities of children. And what happened was, we are going to read now in detail. As primary education became compulsory from the late 19th century, children became an important category of readers. Production of school textbooks became critical for the publishing industry. A children's press devoted to literature for children alone was set up in France in 1857. This press published new words as well as old fairy tales and folk tales. The Grimm brothers in Germany spent years compiling traditional folk tales gathered from peasants. What they collected was edited before the stories were published in a collection in 1812. Anything that was considered unsuitable for children or would appear something not good for children was not published. Rural folk tales thus acquired a new form. In this way, print recorded old tales but also changed them. So as I told you, many folk tales were rephrased to suit the children. Many women became important as readers as well as writers. So women became important as I told you. Penny magazines were specifically meant for women, as were manuals which were teaching proper behavior and housekeeping. This is a front page of a magazine for working class. These were the books for women. Early bookstores were looking like this in Europe. Further innovations. We are going to see what are the further innovations which are made in the world of print. Okay? Now let us see what are those. So Richard M. Hoe of New York perfected the power-driven cylindrical press by the mid-19th century. This could print 8,000 sheets per hour. Offset press was developed in the late 19th century. This could print up to 6 colors at a time. Electrically operated presses came in use from the turn of the 20th century. This helped in accelerating the printing process. Many other innovations took place during this period. All the innovations had a cumulative effect which improved the appearance of printed texts. So you can clearly see the picture of M. Ho and his printing press here. New strategies to sell books. So let us see what were the new strategies which were adopted to sell books. Many periodicals were serialized and important novels were published in the 19th century. In the 1920s in England, popular works were sold in cheap series called the shilling series. These are called as the shilling series. The dust cover or book jacket in the 20th century is a 20th century innovation. Cheap paperback editions were brought to counter the effect of Great Depression. Clear? This was the development. Specialized novels and shilling series of the 19th century looked like this. Dust jackets or book covers which were introduced in the 19th century, as I told you, these were also like this. India and the world of print. So, how print came to India and what was its impact we are going to see now. India and the world of print. The Portuguese missionaries first brought printing press to Goa in the mid-16th century. Like India had a very rich and old tradition of handwritten manuscripts in Sanskrit, Arabic, Persian as well as in various vernacular languages. Manuscripts were copied on palm leaves or on handmade paper before print was introduced into India. So pages were sometimes beautifully illustrated. They would be either pressed between wooden covers or sewn together to ensure preservation. Manuscripts continued to be produced till well after the introduction of print down to the late 19th century. Manuscripts, however, were highly expensive and fragile. They had to be handled carefully and they could not be read easily as the script was written in different styles. So print actually, what came to India by 1674 when about 50 books had been printed in Konkani and Kannada languages. Clear? So Catholic priests printed the first Tamil book in 1579 at Cochin, and in 1713 the first Malayalam book was printed by them. By 1710, Dutch Protestant missionaries had printed 32 Tamil texts, many of them translations of older works. The English language press did not grow in India till quite late, even though the English East India Company began to import presses from the late 17th century. From 1780, James Augustus Hickey began to edit the Bengal Gazette. So remember, this was the first weekly Indian newspaper brought out by Gangadhar Bhattacharya. Hickey also published a lot of gossip about the senior officials of the company. So, Governor General Warren Hastings persecuted Hickey. So, this was how the Bengal Gazette looked like. So, Warren Hastings encouraged publication of officially sanctioned newspaper to protect the image of the colonial government. Print culture helped in initiating new debate on religious, social and political issues in India. Many existing religious practices were criticized. Raja Ram Mohan Roy published the Sambad Kaumudi from 1821 to criticize the orthodox views in Hinduism. The Hindu orthodoxy commissioned the Samachar Chandrika to counter the opinion of Raja Ram Mohan Roy. In 1822, publication of two Persian newspapers began, namely Jami Jahanama and Samshul Akbar. Bombay Samachar, a Gujarati newspaper, appeared in the same year. In North India, the ulama began to publish cheap lithographic prints which contained Persian and Urdu translations of holy scriptures. They also published religious newspapers and tracts. The Deoband Seminary was founded in 1867. It published thousands upon thousands fatwas about proper conduct in the life of Muslims. Ramcharitmanas of Tulsidas was printed from Calcutta in 1810. From the 1880s, the Naval Kishore Press at Lucknow and the Sri Venkateswara Press in Bombay published many religious literatures in vernaculars. Print helped in bringing the religious texts within the reach of the common masses. It also helped in shaping the new political debate. It also helped in connecting the people from various parts of India by carrying news of one part to another. What are the new forms of publications we are going to see now? Initially, people got to read the novels which were written by European writers. But slowly what happened, as more and more people could now read, they wanted to see their own lives, experience, emotions and relationship reflected in what they read. The novel, a literary form which had developed in Europe, ideally catered to this need. It soon acquired distinctively Indian forms and styles. For readers, it opened up a new world of experience and gave a vivid sense of diversity of human lives. Other new literary forms also entered the world of reading. Lyrics, short stories, essays about social and political matters, all these started. But people could not relate to their novels because they were written in the European context. Many writers emerged who began to write in Indian context. People could correlate with the theme and characters of such novels in a better way. Many other new forms of writing also came, as I told you. A new visual culture was taking shape by the end of the 19th century. Many printing presses started to produce visual images in large numbers. Works of painters like Raja Ravi Verma were produced for mass circulation through printing. Let us see his paints. So these are the works by Raja Ravi Verma. By the 1870s, caricature and cartoons were being published in journals and newspapers. So these commented on various social and political issues. Women and print. Many writers wrote about the lives and feelings of women. Due to this, readership among middle class women increased substantially. There were many liberal husbands and fathers who stressed on women's education. While some women got education at home, some others went to schools as well. So this was a time when many women writers also began to express their views through their writings. Conservative Hindus and Muslims were still against women's education. They thought that a girl's mind would be polluted by education. People wanted their daughters to read religious texts but did not want them to read anything else. While Urdu, Tamil, Bengali and Marathi print culture had developed early, Hindi printing began seriously only from the 1870s. Print and the poor people. Its impact. Very cheap small books were brought to markets in 19th century Madras towns. These books were sold as crossroads so that poor people could buy them. Public libraries were set up from the early 20th century, which helped in increasing the access to books. Many rich people set up libraries in order to assert their prestige in their area. Print and censorship. Before 1798, the colonial rulers were not too concerned with censorship. Initially, the control measures were directed against Englishmen in India who were critical of company misrule. After the revolt of 1857, the attitude to freedom of the press changed. The Vernacular Press Act was passed in 1878. The act provided the government with extensive rights to censor reports and editorials in the vernacular press. In case of a seditious report, the newspaper was warned. If the warning was ignored, the press was liable to be seized and the printing machinery confiscated. So with this, we come to the end of the chapter, the print culture and the modern world. Hope you are reading well at home, children. Complete your homeworks in time. Thank you.